We are here with Tier Lists, everybody's favorite podcast. It's October 5th tonight, and we got some spicy rankings for you. So I'm going to be captaining the show. My name is Toe Knuckles. I play in the RPL. Some of you may or may not know me. Either way, it doesn't matter. I'm here with you tonight. And we got Django in the background. He's sick tonight, so he's letting me take lead, and he'll bounce in with his thoughts when it's appropriate. First and foremost, before we kick things off, you should know that these tier lists were done and organized by Elucid and the executive officers. So it's not my personal rankings. It is not Django's personal rankings. It is just our thoughts on the tier list that were given to us by those that have watched the entire league and kind of been able to assess everybody's uh, performance up to this point. So we're going to kick it off with championship. Before we kick it off, Django, do you have any thoughts or anything you'd like to say to the viewers?
No, just a big thanks to Toe Knuckles for helping me out. I am feeling a little bit under the weather, so I didn't want to talk too much tonight. So appreciate you coming on and helping me out.
No problem. You got it. Anyway, let's go ahead, not waste any time, since we do have two leagues to do tier lists for, and that includes 10 total positions and two sets of teams. So we got 12 tier lists we got to go through. Let's not waste any time. Let's jump right into them. Let's go ahead and flip to championship teams and start taking a look at those. The very first thing that we're going to notice here in the championship teams is we got OKT here in the S tier, the lone S tier team. Do you have anything to say about OKT, Django?
I mean, I think the first thing that's going to come to everybody's mind is that OKT, TSF, and LMB are all right now undefeated. And you got to realize that some of these teams have only played one best of three, while some have played best of threes. There was some unfortunate forfeits. So there's very little sample size to take from, but from what we've taken from, OKT seems like the team that has the most dominance out of these three undefeated teams. Very volatile standings as it currently stands, but that's how I feel right now.
Yeah, that's the hard part about whenever you do a tier list only 2 weeks into the season. You have more information than you do when you do your preseason one, but it's still really matchup dependent. You haven't felt out who's going to be the best teams yet, and there hasn't been a lot of consistency. I know we'll see more of that when we get into the prestige, as far as which teams are S tier, which are C tier, and there's some surprise in there. Not to spoil things too much, but I'm more familiar with prestige, so I refer to that. And I think that's really evident here in championship too. There's just too many unknowns. As you said, we got a couple of teams that have played only games against the C tier teams, and that's why they're rated higher. So it's hard to really um, give a lot of information based on that. I have watched a couple of the games that were on the championship streams on Monday. I gotta say there is potential for some of those teams I saw. Tide Pods um, had a lot of good teamwork, but they were missing some key aspects in team play as far as objective control and things like that. That if they were to figure some of those things out, they would definitely rocket up the list. But at the current time, you can't put them above C tier because those are basic elements to a competitive 5v5 environment. So, um, that being said, do you have any other dark horses that are maybe in the B tier or C tier right now that you think could rise?
Um, I like Rift right now. They're not doing too bad. I think they had a pretty tough role compared to most other teams above them. So I think in the future, if they keep playing at this level, it'll be very easy for them to rise, and I think they can even go beyond that. So, yeah, definitely looking for Rift as a more of a dark horse to jump up in the standings.
And just to touch on Rift, if I'm not mistaken, they had probably, like you said, to attest to what you said, the toughest opening 2 week schedule out of any of those teams in championship, and they managed to go with a 1-1 match score, not game score, but match score. Correct?
Yeah, TSF and Rift Raiders both had, I'd say, equally hard schedules right off the bat.
So I know they also got a long timer in Volty on their team, and he's got experience to kind of maybe captain and guide his team through a long season. So I definitely say that they are a contender for a dark horse. And then, like I said, just what I saw off of Pods and their game, uh, they got potential, but potential is such a crazy word to throw around whenever you're talking about teams. It's one of those faux pas words where I don't really like to say it just because, uh, I mean, anyone technically has potential, but they really showed elements of having a base level to grow off of. They just need to put some things together. So I think they're another dark horse. I look forward to seeing how they progress throughout the rest of the season. Um,
Yeah, one more touch-up note before you go on. Going back to Rift a little bit, you mentioned Voltsy about having some experience in previous seasons. They've got a lot of experience on their team. Kim Moon-soo was previously Busuangan. Anger Ranger played. Corrupted Whimsy played a little bit. Raining Barrels played. So they're all returning. The starting five are actually all returning members. So when it gets to playoffs, I really think that team does have an advantage, and I'm curious to see how that shakes things up.
All right. Well, speaking of raining barrels, let's go ahead and swing it into our top lane tier list. And right there, even though his team is B tier, he has been one of the shining bright spots in the two matches for his team. Raining barrels right up there, number one S tier, the only S tier top laner. Give me your thoughts on raining barrels, Django.
Dude, the guy's a beast. Like compared to a lot of the other top laners, a lot of the other top laners in this league, I just see as like uh they aid their team and they help their team win. Raining Barrels is one of the few top laners in championship where I actually see that he wins the game for the team, not help the team wins the game. So yeah, it was a pretty clear S tier for us.
Um, I really another top laner I want to touch on is Free Bard. Free Bard is another one of those guys where he falls more into what you said. He's one of those guys where he helps his team win the game. He may not necessarily carry uh, team solo feed, but he plays the role that is needed of him, and he plays that role well. Whether that's the primary engage tank, whether that is a split pusher. He's just a guy that is a solid player in the top lane, and he knows what he's supposed to do on the champion that he is designated for that game. And so I just wanted to give kudos to Free Bard. Some of these other players, I definitely look forward to hopefully catching a game with Atomic Donut. I love that name. It's a really interesting name. Unfortunately, I can't add anything to that other than his name, and hopefully we get to see him in action in some of the stream games. I'd really like to see what he brings to the table, uh, as well as Dracolia, Sir Teapot, all these guys that we haven't necessarily had a shining light or a spotlight put on them yet. I'd like to see them rise up and see what they can do. See if they can break out of the B tier and the C tier and maybe jump some of the people in front of them.
Yeah, as you see, we've got four people in B tier. I think this is our biggest group of people, is four people in a single tier, because they're all around that same have we seen enough to really know where they're going type of players. I think they can definitely go up or down depending on how they perform. I did want to touch a little bit on the Freebard Sapphire placings. As you see, Sapphire is above Freebard, and honestly, that was a really hard decision on because Freebard, as you said, as we said, is a facilitator for his team, and he goes so far as if you look at Team Solo Feed, the highest kill contributions on their team is their two bot laners, their AD carry and their support. And if you go past that, the highest kill contribution on the team is actually their top laner on the other side of the map. So this guy is actually making a lot of work to facilitate his team. But he doesn't just quite have the laning stats and laning presence that Sapphire does that didn't quite push him into that tier list, but I'd say they're really neck and neck.
All right. Again, I just hope that we get a chance to see more of these top laners that I'm not familiar with. A lot of these are new names, and I just haven't familiarized myself with them. Uh, Having only been 2 weeks into the season, and I do look forward with anticipation to catching some more of these guys. And that's going to be a constant theme throughout the championship tier list. So if I miss over your name or anything like that, I don't mention you specifically. Please don't take it personal. It's not anything against you. I just haven't got a chance to check you out yet. So just understand that that's where I'm coming from. Let's go ahead and hop over to jungle. We see there is no S tier in the jungle right now. No one's really gone above and beyond to um, kind of put themselves on a pedestal as a carry or a uh, pillar for their team to lean on. Kind of more just players that facilitate their team that we were talking about with the top laners. The jungler is typically a quote unquote support role in that it supports the laners, and so being an A tier, B tier, C tier on this list isn't necessarily a bad thing because it still means that you're doing your job of facilitating your lanes. You just haven't stepped out to be a that clutch crutch piece. Man, that's a tongue twister. That your team leans on to get them leads. You're just, and so that doesn't mean that that won't happen by the end of the season. It just means that it hasn't happened yet to this point in the season. A couple names that are familiar: Corrupted Whimsy that you mentioned earlier, Arcana Majoris, and then Wolf of Legends is another one that I see kind of has some interesting stats whenever I'm looking here at the fantasy stats for um, the championship league. He's got really high kill contribution, Wolf of Legends, which means he's really active with his team. Granted, it is only 2 games, so it's hard to rate him higher than we did. But it's really going to be something I look forward to seeing Wolf of Legends and how he goes forward and seeing if he can maybe elevate himself to be that S tier jungler because he is so involved with his getting his team leads and is so involved in the kill participation. What are your thoughts on the junglers here, Django?
Um, I think obviously the biggest thing people are going to be wondering about this tier is the no S tier, and I think it really is just the fact that while some of these players have very clear cut strengths and they play to those strengths, none of these junglers we see have really rounded out very well. Uh, Kawhi Snorlax, I believe, has like a 73% kill contribution, and then he's got like really bad vision control, and his CS is kind of average. And then you got people like Arcanum who are really good in scraps and skirmishes, but their kill contribution is actually Arcanum actually has the lowest kill contribution on Team Solo feed, which as a jungler, it's kind of hard to rank him too high when you've got the lowest kill contribution on the roaming carry of the team. So yeah, just players that don't have like a complete play style, I say.
I will say one thing. I can only speak to this because he was on one of the stream games. I did notice about Arcanum is um, something that I'm not necessarily used to seeing in even the Prestige League, and definitely not in the Championship League. Arcanum has a different playstyle in that he doesn't necessarily facilitate ganks for his lane, but he helps his lane by just creating constant pressure in the opposing jungler's jungle, like their side of the map. And so he kind of neutralizes the other team's jungler, sometimes to a fault because he baits his own team in. And we can kind of see that with maybe his lower vision score. But at the same time, it's really unique. And it's something that I hope that he doesn't necessarily change because it is so different and it can be something that they lean on and use as a strength and kind of snowball off that. But it's really interesting to see how he does that, and he's done it on a variety of ways. I've seen it on the Lee Sin. I know he does it on the Rek'Sai, and he does it with different champions. And so it's not just like well, I can ban out these early game junglers against him because he's going to be in your jungle. He's going to cause constant pressure. He's going to find the other jungler and he's going to make it safe for his laners to get leads on their own. Some people prefer that play style, and it's something that they're going to have to discuss within their team to see if that's how they want to handle laning phase. But I just wanted to point on that and touch on that because it's something I noticed whenever I watched their games on the stream. So
Yeah, definitely. He's got probably the widest champion pool of any jungler that I've personally seen. The few you mentioned, he actually played at least one Ezreal game. He might have played two. It's hard for me to remember. But yeah, junglers in are just generally have really big strengths and really big weaknesses, and I just need to see some of them kind of shore up their weaknesses while not backing out on their strengths. And I think a lot of these junglers are really big players, big voices in their team, and sometimes they just need to rein back and play a little bit more in the game too. So.
all right, let's go ahead and hop over to mid lane. In the mid lane, we do have a surprise name in the S tier. Um, Not surprise in a sense of he doesn't deserve to be there, but surprise in a preseason, it wasn't a name that you would have picked out to be leading the pack as far as mid lane goes. But he is absolutely deserving of it. He has the highest mid lane KDA, a very high, second highest kill contribution on his team. And to be honest, for a championship player, he's actually got a significant advantage in almost every statistical category. He just doesn't rank as high on total points as some other because he's only played 4 games compared to 5. Catfish on Crack is the man we're talking about. Obviously, you guys can see it there on your screen. You want to point out some things that you may or may not have as far as information on Catfish on Crack, other than just the raw stats, which is all I can provide since I haven't seen him play yet. Or did I kind of put you on the spot there because you haven't seen
No,
him play
sorry,
yet either?
I was coughing. Sorry. Apologies for the pause. Um, I believe I saw two of his games specifically. I can't remember who he played against. He's a very lane centric player. I think my only problem is he actually. This is one of those players who will miss 2 CS to get half a combo off on the laner so that he can have the pressure in the lane, and he does that constantly. And so sometimes when he falls really far behind, kind of one of those players. Uh, but he's got the most, I believe, most average assists and most kills of most average assists and most average kills of any mid laner in championship. So definitely, or no, Voltzy has the most average kills. And yeah, he's just kind of a shining star on his team, really. Uh, Definitely a huge pillar to how they play around the game. So yeah, again, I haven't seen too much of how he plays. But over to our A tiers, Voltzy and Ogangri, two players I do know a fair bit more about. Ogangri definitely plays more towards his team, assisting them a little bit more, helping out, usually with more roams. But he keeps his CS really high for a mid laner who roams as much as he does. Voltzy has just been more mechanically prowess. I think those two are really easily swappable depending on just what kind of mid laner your team needs. The reason they're in their positions is I think Ogangri and his style uh, contributes more to his team than Voltzy and his style contributes to his team.
Yeah. Um, Volti, the other thing is, and that I wanted to point out is Ogengri seems to die maybe a little bit more often than you would want one of your carry positions to die. I know you said he assists a lot in his teams, but in the way that they play, as far as being a facilitator and roaming to top and bot to help set up plays for his team. But if he could cut down on the deaths and maybe become a little bit more consistent while assisting his team as far as not trading gold back, I think it would also open up more room for him to move higher up the list as well. Uh, some of these other names I'm seeing on the list, Leptade and Silade, they both have a small sample size of games. They Leptade has decent CS numbers, not amazing, but his kill contribution is pretty low for a mid laner. So it's hard to see what's going on. If he's playing a split pusher in those games, if he's playing something like a Zed or something like that, that would maybe explain the kill contribution being low. Um, Silade has the opposite problem where he's not nearly as lane dominant, but he is more involved in his team's kills. With that 62%, 62.5% kill contribution, both of these players could afford to take a more cautious approach to their positioning and not getting caught out, as evidenced by their kind of lackluster KDAs to this point. But those are definitely things that are easier to improve on than some of the other weaknesses. And so they show, I think they have a lot of room, both of them, to grow and jump up out of that D tier. I just wanted to hit on both of them real quick because that D tier is not really a place where anybody wants to catch themselves or be thought of as a D tier player. So just kind of maybe give an insight into some of the reasons why they are D tier. That way they can grow and hopefully move up. Where we don't have a D tier, they may not make it all the way up to A tier, but at least maybe compete for the C or B tier as the season goes on and get rid of that D tier completely. But right now, they haven't really done anything to show that they're even performing at an average rate. So unfortunately, we do have to give honest ratings, and that is why they are in the D tier. Let's go ahead and hop over to the C, the not the C tier. I'm sorry, the ADCs of the championship to check out that tier list. And sitting up, the lone S tier team solo feeds Larks. Um, Larks is a player that has high kill contribution, as evidenced, or not evidenced, but as noted earlier by Django in the conversation whenever we were talking about top laners. Him and Crow lead their team in kill contribution, and it is a effort where Team Solo Feed plays around those two players, and he really makes it pay off, as you can see by the fact that he's the lone S tier 80 carry in championship.
I think the biggest thing you got to look at when you look at Larks compared to the 3A tiers is he actually averages the least kills out of all of them, um, and is sorry, twisting my tongue. He averages the least kills out of all of them at 9.4 compared to Mastery 7 Vane's 9.8, Defers, oh god, I can't say that name. Trump's 10.2 and Kim's 11.7, but he averages 2 deaths a game, whereas the next lowest between those four is 7.2. That's insane, especially in a meta where AD carries do a lot of damage, so a lot of people want to kill you.
Absolutely. And then we also see he's one of the higher 80 carries in the vision score as well. So it's not just the fact that he's sitting there like getting kills or whatever, but he's also contributing in other ways. He's not the highest out of the 80 carries, but he's definitely uh, among the top quarter of 80 carries in vision score. So it's something to note as you look at his stats to kind of say why is he S tier. It's just that so far through his first 5 games, he hasn't really shown a huge weakness. Whereas, the A tiers, they dive in on you a bunch. Maybe you aren't necessarily repositioning yourself as well, or you aren't um, allowing yourself to push up into the fight at the proper time. You start too far forward, whatever, and so it's leading to high deaths. Sure, you're putting out a lot of damage, you're getting a lot of kills, which you're supposed to do, but you aren't prioritizing the right target. So maybe you're putting yourself in a bad position sometimes. And Larks just doesn't seem to have any of those glaring weaknesses at this point. They haven't been exposed yet, and if they're there. I'm not going to say that he has them or doesn't have them. I'm just saying the stats say that he hasn't shown any glaring weaknesses to this point? Could he be doing stuff better? Absolutely. I think we all could. That's the thing about League of Legends. It's a game where you can always be better, but he hasn't shown any glaring weaknesses to say, hey, man, you're A tier, work on this, and you'll be S tier. So that's why he's S tier right now through the first 5 games.
Yeah, I think also I just want to take a little bit of time to touch on OKT Snooze. Uh, really strong stats. Really strong player in general. Another really high kill contribution, AD carry, extremely low deaths. Just hasn't put in as many games as our A and S tier players. I think he's definitely someone who could shake up the standings once he gets the option to play a little bit more. So definitely watch out for him.
All right. So OKT Snooze is the dark horse. What about Anger Ranger? He's the returning name. Why is he on the C tier, Django?
Because they're a support player. Anger Ranger hasn't had a real great showing so far, like a .9 KDA or something. Only 2 games played as well, so it's hard to judge her. Like 40% kill contribution, pretty below average vision score. Like nothing about her stats are redeeming. And I don't think I believe she's on a struggling team at the moment as well. So not a lot of sample size, no redeeming stats, and on a struggling team. It's just hard to stand out. I do actually know the player a little bit personally. They're definitely not a bad player. Just not not having the greatest showing right off the bat, but they, they definitely have the potential to bring it back.
All right. Good to hear that they're not stuck down there and that they have a chance to elevate their rankings. Let's go ahead, close it out with the supports for championship. And not a surprise to see Crow Brandwin up there in the S tier with his lane partner Larks. That's not surprising at all. Hex Snow up there is joining Crow as I believe this is the only position in championship where there is double S tier, and that includes the teams as well. So, big shout out to those two. They're both playing extremely well so far in the early part of the season. And we look at their stats, and it's really easy to see why. Both of them with a 70% kill contribution through 5 games. So it's not just a one off that they were really involved in one series or one game. They're heavily involved in what their team does. They set up a lot of kills. And of course, their CS per minute is garbage, but, they obviously joke, guys, joke. Okay, bad joke. I know. Sorry. But vision score, both of them, the only two supports in championship to have a vision score above 60. So that's really impressive as well. Hex has a little bit lower KDA. Can you speak to that? Is it because Hex plays more engaged supports or than Crow does, where Crow plays more backliners, or is it just one of those things where uh, maybe Crow is more familiar with the role, whereas Hex is playing as a sacrifice dummy if his AD carry gets in trouble? Do you know anything about why that KDA disparity is there between the two S tier?
From what I've seen, and I haven't seen a lot of Hex. I've seen a good bit of Crow, but I haven't seen a lot of Hex. From what I've seen, Crow is more of the player who will recognize the situation where there is a very low risk and take it immediately. Where, like, okay, so like a risk reward type of players, Crow is more of a person to take it when it's like 80% chance of success, a pretty low risk player. And Hex is like a 60% chance kind of player. So sometimes it gets him into more trouble. But you can also see he's got, I think, actually over, oh my God, I can't math. But yeah, actually over double uh, the assist or the average kills and more average assists. So definitely just gets in there more and tends to bite him in the butt a little bit more as well, which is why his deaths are a bit higher. I don't think it's anything about how they both play the role. I think it's just more of how sure they are on the plays they're making.
Gotcha. Another player that we should point out, maybe is he on the? Yeah, he is. He's A tier. Chajiru. He's definitely he's got the stats to match up with both of the S tier support so far. I think the only thing working against him to this point is a combination of vision score and lack of games played, because the KDA is right up there, actually just splitting the two of them, and the kill contribution is not in the 70% like those two, but it's just barely shy of 70%, and at a 67.9. I think Chajiru, uh, the only reason he's A tier and not S tier is simply because of the fact that the lack of games compared to the other two S tier players.
Chandru definitely has, in my opinion, more dominant lanes on his team, which speaks a little bit to his lower kill contribution. You don't see a free bard and mustard on my feet for team solo feed going out and solo killing their lanes a bunch. So that's a little bit of the kill contribution for Chadro. Definitely a stronger player, but again, low games played. It's hard to say compared to these people who have played 4 or 5 games when they've only played 2. It's hard to rate them fairly.
Um, any supports that you think are in the same boat as maybe Anger Ranger, where they have not had their strongest performances within the first 2 weeks, but are a consistent player that you know of because of past seasons or whatever, and maybe want to quote unquote encourage them or motivate them to raise their performance and play above the tier that they're currently in?
You want me to motivate people, please? Um, uh, probably if I'm speaking to anyone. Personally, I like the playstyle of the Fizzle. I don't actually know a lot of these supports, but from what I've seen of the Fizzle, definitely a playstyle I like. So I'd get behind that player, tell him to, you know, don't give up, follow your dreams, yada yada yada. I'm not inspirational. Don't listen to me.
All right, so Fizzle, you have opportunity there to be the next A tier support with maybe some more consistent play, and I would definitely say a little bit better warding. You tend to be I'm gonna straight up call you out on it. You are the second lowest warding support or vision score support. That does include ward killing too in championship. So that would probably help your cause quite a bit to improve those numbers, because your kill contribution looks pretty decent. Um, so there you go. And that is championship, folks. We're going to go ahead without any delay. We're going to jump right over into prestige, not waste any time since we got started late. We don't want to run super late tonight. So we're going to go ahead and jump over to prestige um, and check out what's going on in prestige. We're going to start out with the teams. I just echoed myself a lot, but it's okay. We'll get over it. S tier, the lone S tier team through the first 2 weeks, and some may call it a surprise, but it is Team Phoenix Fire. Not a surprise that they're up there, but I think that there's another team that maybe uh, could consider themselves S tier, but we'll get into that as we work our way down the list. Team Phoenix Fire, why are they S tier, Django?
Sorry, coughing again. Uh, Team Phoenix Fire, and I'm pretty sure the other one you're talking about specifically is Council of Yorick. They actually both had pretty hard. Oh my god, hold on, my push to talk just died. Um, Team Phoenix Fire definitely had just just dominance. It definitely showed dominance in their games. Council of Yorick's, there were parts where I wasn't 100% sure on them. Uh, a few things stood out. Definitely both really good teams. They're both high up there. But Phoenix Fire just seemed more dominant. And again, we're going off of 2 weeks of play here, so cut us a little bit of slack. There's not all the information in the world.
Fair enough. I know one thing, and the reason why I was kind of surprised, and yes, you were correct in the guess. It was Council of Yorick's, wondering why they weren't up in the S tier, why we didn't go ahead and put both 6 point teams in the S tier. But I can speak to Council of Yorick's because we have played against them, have not played against Team Phoenix Fire yet, although they have a very strong roster. I know the thing about Council of Yorick's is they have done a very good job of studying the meta and actually drafting to the meta and playing the front to back team style fight that tends to dominate the meta. They may I know this was said about them at the very beginning of the season. They don't necessarily have any players that wow you. There's a lot of players where when you look at their roster, you go, "Oh yeah, he's a solid player," but not a lot of them have ever been the quote unquote names that jump off paper at you. But I think a lot of times that can actually be beneficial to a team because you don't necessarily get personalities in the way. You don't have teams necessarily trying to sit there and struggle if one of their top tier, their S tier quote unquote player is struggling in a certain game. You don't necessarily see a huge dip in performance because the rest of the team is solid across the board, and so they can pick it up. And so it's really going to be interesting to see the kind of pace that Council of Yorick's and Team Phoenix Fire both set for the rest of the Prestige League going forward, and see how all of it plays out. Now, speaking of surprises, I'm not even going to speak to my own team. Uh, I think I think you guys nailed where we're at through 2 weeks in the season, right there in the B tier. But the big surprise for me with the names on paper,
Literally
XD,
every team in the C tier.
every team in the C tier. Yes, absolutely. Like if you look at their rosters, if you would, Volti, go ahead and pull. If you have the roster screen available, if you pull that up for the viewers to see, um, XD Esports, you got legendary players like TSM Batman. You have hyped up names like Nico Feather, Moose Cadet, and Pixel God all on this team, and they are struggling so far to this season. And Clorox Bleach, the returning champions, the team that made their name famous by being the first ever to sweep in the finals, are sitting here with one game win, not even match win, one game win so far on the season. And then, of course, Crit Me Senpai, another name that is um, been around in RPL. And they got Foley. Granted, Foley is, I remember him as a top laner, Guillaume, Pax Jax, and all three of those teams are struggling out of the gates. Granted, Clark's Bleach did have a fairly tough schedule to open. I know they played uh, S4, and who else did they play? I don't remember. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, were we talking about CB or CMS?
CB.
CB played BME week 1.
Okay, so I mean they had a fairly tough opening schedule. Not the toughest it could have been, but they had a fairly tough opening schedule. And I know they did have roster changes, so that could possibly explain part of the reason why they're struggling to figure it out is figuring out how the new team plays within those roles and whatnot going forward. XD, Django, I know you're closely tied to this team. You want to maybe give us insight into some of the reasons as to why they're struggling and what they can do to right the ship, so to speak?
Um, I think week 1 you can attribute it mostly to roster issues. They had some roster swaps going into week 2, and then were unfortunately unable to play and had to surrender week 2. So I don't think XDCB or CMS is going to stay um a C tier team. Like if BME, Yeet, and TOP stay at the level they're at, I think by next time, all 3 of these teams can come out. We can have no C tier teams. I think there's a lot of competition this year. I think for some of the teams, I think even for more than just XD, I think CMS personally falls into this category too. It's small roster things that they just need to get figured out, and then I just feel like they're gonna click. Because, like you said, there is a lot of big names on these teams. There's names that you almost expect to step up. And I think once they figure things out a little bit within their teams, they'll show up. I hope they'll show up because we all want more competition. That's what makes it fun, right?
Absolutely. And I said I wasn't going to say anything to TLP, but I just kind of wanted to offer insight as to why I said you nailed exactly why our position exactly is. We are using a 10-man roster, and so I feel like depending upon the combination of roster that we use on any given night, uh, we have the potential to beat any of the teams above us, but we also have the potential to lose to any of the teams below us, and so that's why I think P tier is perfect place for TLP at this point in the season. Hopefully by uh, playoffs we'll narrow that down. Instead of 10 we'll be having a core of maybe 6 or 7 that we're using, or even mostly just 5. But it'll be interesting to see how the season plays out for us, that's for sure. I'm excited. Let's go ahead.
You got placed right below the team that beat you and right above the team that you beat. So couldn't
There
figure
you
a
go.
better place.
Exactly.
All right, let's go.
All right, so on to the top laners. S tier, Nomadic Crates, and this is a surprise to me because Nomadic Crates actually, if I'm not mistaken, he is a position swap, isn't he? He played AD carry last split. Is that correct? My memory serves
He
me correct.
actually played AD carry way back. He is a season 1 champion. Played AD carry against me. Uh, so I know this player very well. Don't know him too well personally. I got a little bit of ties with Team Reptar, but Nomadic Rates I don't know too well personally. But as a player, I definitely know him very well. I have a lot of respect for the guy. He's extremely mechanically gifted. And even with the role swap, he is putting up numbers and pressure. And dude, he's a beast. I'm biased. He's a beast.
Um, I just want to go ahead and brag on my boy Xlizzo here. He hasn't got to play except for 1 week in the RPL so far. I can tell you he is one of the better laning top laners that I've seen in quite some time. And uh, he's very good in this meta because when tanks are strong and AD items are strong, it makes bruisers really strong, and that is his preferred champion pool is bruisers, and so um, he's absolutely loving this meta. Hopefully, I talk about developing consistency on TLP's roster, and that's one of the areas that I want to nail down and lock down is making sure he's there every week. He's only gotten 2 games in, and he doesn't have any crazy overwhelming stats as far as like KDA, but his CS per minute and it would kind of help point to the what I evidenced about being pretty lane dominant, and his kill contribution doesn't suffer because of it, like we see in some of the other top laners like Frosty Axe, Unagi. They have good laning phases, you can tell by their numbers, but they aren't necessarily a focal point of what their team's trying to do. So yeah, I'm sorry I had to brag on Strike on not Striker Slizzo because a lot of my other teammates are known throughout the league. Panther, Silver Spade, they're both Hall of Famers. And so I just wanted to kind of give my boy Slizzo some props in case he's out there listening or watches the replay. Um, let's talk about some other players down here. Yanagi and Striker, both in the B tier, both players that have been around the RPL before. And what are we looking at whenever we see Striker and Yanagi in the B tier?
I think we're looking at players that have how do I these are players that have the capability to do more than what they've done. So it's really hard to put them anywhere higher than B tier when we know, and they know that they can perform better than they have. So we're definitely looking out for that to move them up. I think top lane has got a lot of competition. I think by the end, this could all be flip flop. You could have like Moose Cadet, Frosty, and Slizzo at the top. I don't think maybe Nomad will still be up there, but there's so there. I think there's so many good top laners relative to previous years. So I think top lane's always really fun to watch,
Okay, chat.
as long as they don't pick a bunch of tanks.
Okay, chat. Correct me if I'm wrong. I will give you opportunity to flame me. Not that you already haven't been. I just haven't been paying attention, but I'll actually read it if you do this time. Um, One thing I wanted to point out and call note to is one of our A tier, Micah J, Micah. I don't know how to say the complete name, so we're just going to call you Micah. Um, was the only Orn so far I've seen that got pulled out and played it to success. Not necessarily the only Orn played, but the only Orn I've seen played to success. So major props to Micah because I know that is not an easy champion to play, and I just wanted to kind of give you props for that because I respect it. Um, let's go ahead and jump over to the junglers since I made my final point in the top lane there. And there it is, S tier, my boy Panther. Not surprised on that. We all know why he's S tier. He's been around forever. He's a focal point for our play style as far as he is heavily involved in kill participation. He moves around the map really well. He's a Hall of Famer, and he hasn't really done anything to take a step back. He adapts to the meta and makes it work for him. Panther S tier player. Let's go ahead and jump into some of the other players that don't necessarily get a lot of love because um, they haven't been in the Hall of Fame before and maybe haven't been talked about as far as across the board like Panther and Batman have. Let's talk about iZaniax. iZaniax is a player that when I watch him and I have seen slash scrimmed slash whatever my exposure to iZaniax is he is an incredibly mechanically gifted player, but I feel like a lot of times he might cost his team in a sense that he is playing to have fun and it is important to have fun, but I think sometimes his item build he makes choices that aren't necessarily beneficial to his team. Um, but you still can't take away from him because of the incredible mechanical prowess that he shows. And so we're left here in a conundrum where he has S tier mechanics, but some of his choices definitely knock him down a peg. And so I think A tier might be kind of kind. I think the fact that some of the games I've seen him in, if they could have punished his item choices a little bit harder, it might have cost his team games. And so I would almost maybe say he's floating between B tier and A tier. And I think that's all based upon his item choices and whatnot. I don't think it's anything to do with him as a player. Just I think sometimes he has a little bit too much fun in competitive games as well. I wanted to give a props to Minute Militia. Uh, Only player I will likely see. You guys can again. This is a challenge if you guys want to. If you guys think you can pull it off. The Nidalee he played with the Ardent Sensor in Espor's game against Clorox Bleach. The fact that he was able to kill carries on a Nidalee, not get out pressured in the jungle, and still buff up his AD carry to insane standards to help them win that game. uh, Again, it's only one game, so I have a hard time pointing to the totality of Minute Militia's season, but that right there is something that sticks out in my mind and is um, very impressive. So I just wanted to give major props to him.
Yeah, and I'm gonna point out one thing because it's all through chat. TSM Batman in the D tier, and I'm just gonna quickly explain this because it's really obvious in my mind, but apparently not really obvious in everybody else's. TSM Batman has been a an RPL Hall of Famer. He's been in finals 2 out of the 3 seasons, and I think made it to semis the third season. And this guy has 2 games on record this season, and just got absolutely flopped. Like this guy got absolutely smashed in 2 games. So how am I supposed to look at a player who's been so dominant and then just absolutely flopped and be like, give him B tier, right? Like, I don't think he's a D tier player. It's just all the stats we have to go off in this season show him as a D tier player. But again, it's kind of like XD, CB, and CMS. I don't think any of those guys are gonna stay down there, and I don't expect TSM Batman to stay down there either.
I also don't think Spoder One is a D tier caliber player, but so far through 2 weeks, it's like you said, his performance has shown that he has been a D tier jungler. And part of that is because he did role swap from top lane to jungler to help his team out, but he just hasn't put all the cogs in the wheel yet to make sure his team gets rolling. So that's why Spoder One, I believe, is in D tier 2. I think both of those players should rise before the end of the season is over, but it is important when you see two legacy names like that to kind of uh, explain why those two players are rated so low. Um, let's go ahead and jump over to mid. And this one doesn't surprise me as far as the S tier player. I hate anime. I hate anime is someone I have laned against, someone that is a very good mechanical player, puts tons of pressure on his opposing laner, roams well, puts pressure on other lanes, and he is a carry for his team, and there is no other way to say it. When we talked about earlier, we kind of defined S tier players as not just players that help their team win, but to an extent, they are the reason their team wins, and that describes I Hate Anime perfectly. He is without a doubt the most dominant mid laner to this point in RPL, and I don't think anyone can argue that.
I've played mid lane in RPL like 2 or 3 times, and I've played against players who people tell me are like top 2, top 3, and man, they're kind of whatever. Their lane's okay. I don't feel too much pressure, and yet you look at any lane that I hate anime in, and the opposing laner looks like they're staring down the barrel of a shotgun. It's terrifying to lane against this guy. Uh, Played against him in finals season 1, beast of a player, destroyed my ass on Katarina. So got some history, and he definitely he always puts up. The guy's very consistent, strong laner, strong, really good, just really good all around player.
Another name that is awesome to see just because he's someone that when he came into the league, kind of befriended him and uh, got to play with him, and he's a really good kid, young guy, but shows a lot of potential, and that's Portal 2 Epic in the A tier. Um, I think one of the things you can critique about Portal is his champion pool. Um, as far as his effective champion pool may not be as vast as other players like I Hate Anime, like Magnet Cross, like Dan is on Fire. Some of these guys that have always been in competitive League of Legends. And so they might have wider champion pools, and he might have to develop that if he wants to stay in the A tier. But it's great to see him having individual success as well as his team having success too. And before you think I'm like kissing up to his butt, remember I didn't make these ratings whatsoever. I had no say in them. They got revealed to me right before the show, and so it's not my bias putting him in the A tier. It's just me commenting on my bias of why he's in the A tier. So. Infinite Freedom is another one that I saw in playoffs last year, championship playoffs. Actually, was that finals that he was in? I don't know. But Infinite Freedom is another player that's exciting to watch. I got a kick. I'm a Zed main, and his Zed was pretty clean for our elo for a gold cap league. It's pretty clean, and it's another player that I enjoy watching as a mid lane main, and it another player that I can't wait to see how he develops. What are your thoughts so far on mid lane tier list?
Dude, I'm sad, man. When I first saw all of the teams this season, I Hate Anime wasn't on the list. Then when I first saw all the teams, and I really saw these lists, and I'm just like, man, Neko Feather and Guyomi, give me a double S tier mid lane, please. Unfortunately, both on teams that kind of didn't have really good showings. Both players that can definitely turn around their bad showings. Um, Yeah, kind of just the same effect with the CB CMS. It seems like I'm a broken record at this point, but a lot of these lower tier players have just not stepped up yet, especially when we've expected them to. Uh, and once they step up, I'm not even gonna say if. Once they step up, it will be very easy to move them up because definitely good players just haven't had good showings yet.
So, and again, for everyone in chat that's questioning why is this player this tier, why is this player that tier, keep in mind this is mostly based off stats with
We're 2 weeks in. Come on, give us a break.
but you can't completely just base that off stats off 2 weeks. Some of these players are players that can make impressions, and so they may not have been knocked down near as far as what the stats should say they were. Maybe if they were a D tier player in stats, they were sitting at a C tier in some levels. Not saying mid lane specifically, just because we're hovering that page, but saying all across the board, because we know that they may have had a tough opening week schedule compared to other players, et cetera, et cetera. This is mostly based off stats with a little bit of credit given to players that are known to perform better than what stats have shown. So, again, and that's just going off what we've seen so far through 2 weeks. So, a lot of room for these lists to change by the halfway point of the season, and whatnot. Let's go ahead and roll over to ADC. I'm not really surprised. Two AD carries who are play on teams that are both doing well and play on teams where they are bot lane centric, play a lot of protect the carry comps, play front to back styles, and their stats back it up and they prove it. And that's Ephigia and Never. Sorry, it's actually Never. We actually had this conversation the other day. Both of them are performing incredibly well to this point. Um, and Never is a player that has been around RPL for a long time, um, and he has he has not been on a team yet that takes advantages of his strengths, and so it's kind of a coming out party for him, so to speak, in a sense that he is finally getting to put on display, at least through the first 2 weeks, of what he's capable of doing whenever he actually has a team that is able to play around him and is a strong team to where he's not focused so hard by the other team to where he can actually perform his role, and he's able to perform it. So Evagia and Never both really good ADCs, and kind of are the pace setters for the AD carry position in Prestige.
Yeah, it's really hard for me to give AD carries props as an AD carry main myself. You know, I notice more mistakes, I see more bad trends, but I also see the good stuff, and a lot of these players have really good things going for them. Ephigia and Never, probably just two players that, to me at least, make a lot less mistakes than the rest of the player on the list. Uh, they're both really strong in their mechanics and their decision making in team fights, but they make so much less mistakes. That is not good English, but I'm sick, so I don't care. Uh, so yeah, that's just my brief hint at the AD carry. I tried to stay away from this one because
Because I wouldn't have made A tier if you were doing.
truly,
I just it feels good. I want to brag on myself a little bit, getting A tier on the ADC tier list when I'm playing off role, filling in right now because our ADC has been working on Saturdays, and so I've been role swapping from mid to ADC, and feels good to kind of be performing well off role. So hopefully I can keep it up for the sake of my team and whatnot. But I definitely know that there are other AD carries on this list that will challenge me in laning phase and will make that difficult if I do remain in the AD carry list. I've already bumped heads with Never, and he's a good player, and Effigy, I've seen him play, and I I look forward to the challenge of getting to lane against him if I'm still in the 80 carry slot. And Dr. Warlock is another one. I believe he's swapping over from support to 80 carry, but he has been in the bot lane a lot longer than I have. So I think as far as people swapping over to new roles, I think that gives him a long-term advantage because he knows the lane matchups a little bit better than I do. And so um, I, I gotta say, Indio 12, a lot of people give him shit, but I do have to point out if you look at the fantasy stats for 80 carries, Indio 12 is one of only two 80 carries with a triple kill or higher. So, I mean, he's he's at least doing his job, if nothing else. He's getting the kills and putting out damage. So he's got a lot of weaknesses, as we would say, is the reason he's in C tier that he could improve on. But I definitely think you could be worse off than a player like Indio 12. Um, and I don't know. That's kind of my thoughts on the 80 carry tier list. Wait, what was the one? Oh yeah, we talked about this before stream went on air. It was Major Duty. I'm sorry, was it Major Duty? You're gonna have to help me out on this, Django. I'm kind of flying by the seat of my pants right here. Was it
With like
Major?
the absolutely ridiculous stats, but only 2 games played, so we couldn't put him too high.
Yes, or was
Yeah,
that?
guy's got like 8.8 CS per minute, but only 2 games played. It's so sad.
Has a really high kill contribution for his team. Like he's got an okay KDA, but I mean, it's if he's on a team that where he just popped off one game, that could kind of explain the the deaths. If he was popping off really hard, kind of solo carry in the game, then obviously you become a focal point and you're a squishy little 80 carry, so you get popped super fast. So that, but Major Duty is someone that you guys should be on the lookout for that could possibly even jump into the S tier because he does have ridiculous stats. He just only has ridiculous stats through 2 games. So that being said, let's go ahead and jump over to our final tier list before we cut out of here for tonight. And that is the support tier list. Um, Up there, Jenga, what I know Rookter gets made fun of for saying that support's name wrong. So our S tier gentlemen,
KG. That's how
KG.
I play it. So if
I
I say it wrong, then I say it wrong. I don't really give a crap.
see. I would have Keji is what I think. So I would have been off, but okay. I don't think how you say your name matters when you're S tier, but you're getting people to say it whether they're saying it right or wrong. So he's getting noticed, and that's what matters, right? So I think Keji is an incredible compliment to Effigy. Those two have a lot of synergy. You can hear it in game, out of game. They play off each other really well. Whether they're commentating, whether they're other games, whether they're playing together in game, those two have a lot of synergy, and I think they are a strong bot lane that really props up S4 and kind of are the you talk about the strengths that each team plays around. They are the strength that S4 plays around, and it'll it'll be interesting to see. I keep that's a phrase I use a lot, but it really is true, and it's almost all you can say go with 2 weeks into the season if they can maintain that and keep that up going forward. Um, Silver Spade 10, we talked about him earlier when I talked about TLP and was talking about Slizzo, Hall of Fame player. He is consistently good, um, a playmaker for TLP, and will always be in that top echelon of supports. Even if he is an S tier, he will be one of the A tier uh, supports, and that's not an opinion. That's a fact. MTR Agent Brom, Hall of Famer, I believe. Is that correct? Was I right in saying that? Is he a Hall of Famer as well?
Either Hall of Famer or like a really close second from last season. I can't remember. But yeah, a player that's been here before.
Yeah, another incredible player in the support role. Just really makes plays for his team and sets it up really well. Keeker, another one of those players where he's B tier. You could say that maybe he doesn't quite deserve B tier yet, but he kind of got some. He's that fringe. You can tell he's the bottom of the B tier right now, um, and he's definitely got to step it up, not only to prove his own individual worth on the support tier list, but to help Clorox Bleach kind of turn it around and right their ship. Pax Jax Hacks, another player we talked about where they're on quote unquote a legacy team and they just start performing up to their standards. And I'm just looking at this list up and down as I'm saying the names, and I have got to say, we talk about top lane being strong. Our supports in RPL are really strong this year. There's not a name on this list where I look down and I go, oh, yeah, well, they're a player that you can abuse. I don't feel that way about any of these players. They can all hold their own in their own right. I think it's just been 2 weeks into the season. And so, like, there's a lot of shakeup and a lot of names that you have lower than you would normally expect to be.
Yeah, definitely a lot of shakeups and a lot of players just in spots where how do I put this? A lot of players just in spots where you really don't expect them to be, and again, a lot of that is we did a tier list 2 weeks in. Shit's gonna be weird. So definitely just some shakeups that we weren't really suspecting, but again, I think next tier list will be a lot more stable, and that'll be a lot more entertaining. I was gonna say correct, but then I'm like, wait, no, that's a horrible way to phrase it. So yeah, just a lot of this is uh the information we've gathered for this is 2 weeks time, so not a lot to go off of.
And it probably won't happen before the next tier list, considering the midway point is only a few weeks away. If we were to do one at the midway point, I don't know how long we're waiting. If we're doing one every 2 weeks or like 2 weeks midway and then right before playoffs. But I'll leave that for the powers that be to decide. But one thing to keep in mind where we sit here on this tier list, and by the time we hit playoffs, there's going to be a preseason patch with new runes that will completely shake up the meta, and there's chances for S tier players to fall all the way to B tier and vice versa, depending upon how runes affects things and how runes affects certain people's playstyles, team compositions, teams that fight front to back right now and do really well at it. The meta could shake up to be more of a wide open, in your face pick skirmishy brawly style instead of a 5v5 bump head style, and it could benefit certain teams way more than others. And so I think that's another thing to keep in mind is, there is going to be a huge patch between now and the end of the season that will completely shake up these rankings for the most part. I mean, of course, your top, I expect the top of the top to stay at the top just because they are players that can adapt to the meta and they aren't locked into one style. But I think for a lot of maybe A and B tier players, it could really shake that section up.
Yeah, definitely, and yeah, that's a really good place to end that. We do, unfortunately, I don't have a visual yet, but we do have a power rankings on the RML teams for people who are curious. I was just gonna quickly go over that. Sorry, coughing. Like I said, quite sick. But going over power rankings. In I just said there's no visual, Voltsy. Don't troll me. uh, just find like just find the RML teams and bring them up or something. But yeah, for the power rankings, we got Purdue University Gold in number one. University of Houston taking second place. DNA taking third place. Purdue University Black fourth. CMU, Central Michigan University, in 5th. University of Virginia, 6th. RPI, which is, dude, don't ask me to say their name. I will mess it up. 7th, and Phoenix Gaming in 8th. Apologies, coughing, and I didn't turn off my push to talk. But yeah, so that'll be it for podcast number 11. I'm pretty sure it's 11. Thank you, Toe Knuckles, for joining me. I'm pretty sure he just had to step out. We went a little bit over what we were supposed to, so I don't think he'll be here to say closing words. Just me. I know you all love me, and by love me, I mean hate you. Hate me. Lol. But yeah, thank you for joining me here, podcast number 11, and we'll see y'all next